She took my husband's house after the funeral, but she didn't know what he left me. The funeral was a blur of black silhouettes and hollow words. Rain fell in a slow, relentless drizzle, soaking the edges of my coat and turning the cemetery earth to thick, clinging mud. People murmured platitudes. Asterisk, he was so young, so tragic, stay strong, asterisk, but their voices floated around me like static. I couldn't hear them, not really. Not with the roaring silence in my chest where Michael's heartbeat used to live. I stood motionless beside his casket, my hand resting on the polished wood as if I could still feel him beneath it. Just last week, he was laughing in the kitchen, butter on his chin from the pancakes he always burnt. Now he was a name etched into the funeral program, a body sealed in oak and satin. My husband. My partner of 8 years. Gone in a single, godless heartbeat. His mother, Evelyn, wore black silk and pearls that caught the light like teeth. She sobbed into a lace handkerchief, dabbing theatrically at her eyes between outbursts. She clung to the attention like a drowning woman to a lifeboat, surrounded by relatives who coddled her grief with soft hands and whispered reverence. But I knew Evelyn. I had seen her true face too many times to mistake her show for sincerity. She cried louder than anyone else, but her eyes stayed dry when no one was looking. She held her designer handbag like it was a relic, not once setting it down, not even to hug her own son goodbye. Her grief was too precise, too curated. And when our eyes met, just for a moment, the veil slipped. Behind her mascara-lined tears, I saw it, the glint of resentment, the cold calculation. She didn't just lose a son today. She was already recalculating her position in the aftermath. I had braced myself for sorrow, for that unbearable ache of absence. But what I hadn't prepared for was the quiet venom, the unspoken blame. The sense that this funeral was not the end, but the beginning of something far darker. I expected to bury my husband. I didn't expect to be standing at the edge of a war. It happened 3 weeks later. The bags of groceries cut into my fingers as I climbed the front steps, juggling keys and hope. I had finally bought Michael's favorite coffee, the dark roast he used to swear gave him just enough bitterness to survive Mondays. It felt like a small act of normalcy, something tangible in the fog of grief. I just wanted to go inside, light a candle, and feel like I was still tethered to him somehow. But when I reached the door, something felt wrong. My key didn't fit. I tried again, frowning. Wiggled it left, right, then pulled it out and checked it as if the shape had somehow changed. Confused, I stepped back and stared at the door. Same navy blue. Same wreath I'd hung after our anniversary trip to Maine. But now, suddenly, it felt foreign. Closed. Unwelcoming. I rang the bell. After a moment, the door creaked open, and there she was. Evelyn. She wore cream silk and a string of pearls so white they gleamed against her neck. Her lipstick was flawless. A long-stemmed glass of wine rested delicately in her hand, as if she'd just walked out of a luxury estate brochure. She looked relaxed. Triumphant. Like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Oh," she said, feigning surprise. "You're here." "I live here," I replied, slowly. "Why doesn't my key work?" Evelyn took a slow sip of her wine, then leaned against the doorframe, her tone clipped and icy. "Correction, you lived here. This house was in Michael's name. My son paid every mortgage payment. And you." Her lips curled into a smug smile. "You were just company." The words hit like a slap. I blinked, trying to process. "I'm his wife," I said, my voice trembling but steady. She snapped, the softness dropping from her tone like a mask. "And now, legally, I'm next of kin. You were never added to the deed. That was his choice. I warned him it would end badly, but he believed in you." She gave a theatrical sigh. "Love makes fools of men." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I felt as if the ground beneath me had been pulled away, one tile at a time. Evelyn looked me up and down, her gaze dripping with quiet victory. "You should have married smarter," she added. "Now, if you'll excuse me." She stepped back and, with one final, infuriating smile, closed the door. I stood there on the porch, groceries at my feet, heart pounding in my ears. Homeless. Widowed. Betrayed. And the war had officially begun. I slept in my car that night. curled up in the back seat of our old Toyota, with a duffel bag for a pillow and my coat pulled tight around me. I stared at the ceiling, too stunned to cry. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evelyn smirk. Heard the click of the door as she shut me out of the life Michael and I had built together. My muscles ached from exhaustion, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. How could everything unravel so quickly? How had I become a stranger to my own home? By morning, the frost on the windshield had melted into beads of water, and the world outside felt gray and distant. I didn't know where else to go, but I remembered something, one small thread of hope, buried in memory. Michael's voice echoed in my mind. If anything ever happens to me, check the gray safe in Unit 14. He had said it with that half-serious, half-joking tone he used whenever he was being more thoughtful than he let on. I'd brushed it off then, teasing him about being too dramatic. But now, with nowhere left to turn, I gripped the small brass key he'd once handed me like a lifeline. My fingers tightened around it as if it could anchor me. The storage facility hadn't changed. Rows of metal doors, a keypad that beeped with indifference, and the faint smell of dust and old furniture. My breath fogged in the cold air as I walked the narrow corridor to Unit 14, praying he'd left me something, anything, that could help me make sense of the chaos Evelyn had unleashed. The lock clicked open with a turn that felt heavier than it should have. Inside, the unit was sparse. A few plastic tubs, a toolbox, and the gray fireproof safe that sat on a low shelf in the back corner, just where he said it would be. I knelt down, heart pounding. The combination still worked. When the door creaked open, a wave of emotion hit me so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight. There were our wedding photos, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. A thick envelope of cash, maybe emergency savings, though I had no idea he'd kept it here. But it was the third item that made my breath catch in my throat. A sealed envelope. Thick ivory paper. Michael's handwriting in blue ink across the front. For my wife, only open if Evelyn interferes. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. I stared at the words, unable to move for a long moment. It was like he had reached through time, through death, to speak to me again. The envelope was heavier than it looked. My hands shook violently as I tore it open. Somewhere inside, I already knew, Michael had seen this coming. And he had left me more than just memories. He had left me a weapon. Inside was a letter and a folder of legal documents. The letter read, "If you're reading this, it means she's already tried to take everything. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I wanted to protect you. I transferred the cabin to your name 2 months ago. It's not just a cabin, it's where I built my second project. Off-grid, safe, and profitable. Inside the cabin's floorboards is a lockbox. You'll find what you need there. She'll never see it coming." I stared at the papers. A deed in my name. A will addendum witnessed by 2 of his closest friends. And a bank account tied to something called Horizon Ridge Development Company. My husband had left me something bigger than a house. He left me power. I drove to the cabin the next morning, the one hidden deep in the woods where Michael and I had spent our most peaceful weekends, miles from the city, from work, from everything. The gravel road twisted between towering pines and autumn-slicked leaves, and by the time the cabin came into view, a quiet ache had settled in my chest. From the outside, it looked forgotten, shutters drawn, weeds curling around the porch, the wooden deck faded to silver. But the moment I stepped inside, everything changed. The air was clean. The wood floors swept. Supplies were neatly organized on the kitchen shelves. A fire had clearly been lit in the last few days. It wasn't abandoned at all. Michael had kept it alive, maintained it like a shrine. Just like he always said, not all treasures are buried in banks. I walked to the center of the living room, where we used to play cards on stormy nights, and knelt. Beneath the old braided rug, under a loose floorboard, I found it, a square of metal with a recessed handle. My heart raced. I pried it open and lifted out a heavy, fireproof box. Inside, a USB drive with a Horizon Ridge logo etched into its surface. Several land purchase contracts, all signed by Michael. A thick, bound document labeled, Horizon Ridge, Confidential Phase 3 Buyout Agreement. I skimmed through the files with shaking hands. Michael hadn't just built this place for escape. He had used it as his headquarters. Horizon Ridge was a renewable energy project that had already launched 2 successful phases. But Phase 3, this one, was the crown jewel. And Michael held a significant stake in it. The numbers didn't lie. In just 1 year, his investment had tripled. According to the documents, his remaining shares were worth over $2.4 million. And then came the final line in the packet. All shares, assets, and ownership rights are hereby transferred to Lila Callahan upon the death of Michael Callahan. My breath caught. My hands trembled. He had known Evelyn would come for the house. He had predicted her greed. But he had made sure she would get nothing that mattered. She took the house. But what Michael left me was so much more. He left me a future she could never touch. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the familiar house, my breath fogging in the cold morning air. My old home, now claimed by a woman who saw love as leverage and grief as opportunity. I knocked on the door, not out of courtesy, but closure. Evelyn opened it moments later, dressed immaculately in a pale silk blouse and tailored slacks, holding a flute of champagne as if celebrating something I wasn't invited to. Her smirk was immediate, smug. "Decided to visit your past?" she asked, voice dripping with mockery. I smiled, calm and deliberate. "No, just wanted to give you something." I handed her a thick envelope. She took it with narrowed eyes, suspicious but curious. As she flipped it open and scanned the papers inside, her expression shifted. Her lips parted, and the color slowly drained from her cheeks. As per Michael Callahan's amended will and corporate share division agreement, this is to notify you that Horizon Ridge Holdings now owns the land beneath this home, including the mineral and easement rights. You have 30 days to vacate or pay the new lease rate. The words struck like a hammer. "You're bluffing," she said, her voice sharp but trembling. I tilted my head, let the smile stretch wider. "Check with your lawyer," I said softly. "Michael left me the future. You can keep the past." Her hand fell to her side, the letter fluttering slightly as her grip loosened. She stepped back into the house without another word, and I turned around, walking away from the threshold she thought would always belong to her. For the first time in weeks, I didn't look back. She was gone within 20 days.